Hey, what's up, guys? Originally, this comp was going to be posted as a test for people to see how their machines would perform, but I'm gonna just go ahead and do the video, kind of point everything out. This won't be a step-by-step tutorial. I probably will never do those, but this will be more of a look into how I achieved this effect and this comp. And the reason why this came about was, I think it was a couple of days ago, I believe his name is Skyline Motion, released a tutorial on paint stroke titles. And just like anything, everything that's released is great for the community. Any approach, any kind of comps or techniques that can be shown to the community to help in Fusion is always awesome. But the problem I had with the tutorial was that the final results threw me out of the illusion of the paint effect. It didn't look like a paint effect to me, and I'll kind of show you that. But I went ahead, I'm going to walk you through my comp here and kind of show you some of the tips and tricks that I use, some things you may or may not know, mostly just to show you that there's an alternate way to do something. So this is just, if you've seen dribble, you've seen those rebounds. And this is very similar to this. That's why I named the comp Refusion. And it's just an alternate approach that I feel is a little more realistic. And again, something that can be improved, but a little more realistic than what SkyMotion showed in his tutorial. So I'm gonna jump through here. So if you look, this is a presentation timeline. If you've already seen the trailer on Facebook or, actually I only posted it on Facebook, but if you've seen the trailer on Facebook and the forums or the groups, then you'll know what this is. It's just how I put a quick timeline together to kind of show off what I was trying to do. Outside of that, we have two other comps. One is a Fusion comp and the other is a brushes comp. And I'll go over the brushes comp a little bit as we get into the Fusion comp. So here's this Fusion comp. It's just a standalone, and I'll show you why that I've done this. It gives me a little more flexibility when working with Resolve. Now I do have Fusion Studio installed, and mostly that's where I do my testing and my work. Here we go. If I jump into Fusion, you'll see that we have this node structure, and I'll kind of walk through everything from beginning to end to show you guys kind of how this was put together step by step. So the first thing I should really go over, let's close these. If I zoom in up here, here is the reference footage. Sorry, let's back up. Just a few housekeeping things. One of the things is that I build my comps vertically and then connect horizontally. So you'll see a lot of the tools are built going down and then merges all the way across here. Usually this line or even this bottom line going horizontally is the connected elements, and anything from top to bottom is the build element. So if I right click on here, you'll notice a couple of things. I don't have show instance lines turned on, which I am using some instances. You'll see, if we go back, the build flow horizontal or vertically, and then you'll see the direct pipes. This is the way I like to build. Everybody else likes to do their things differently. This is just the way I do it. So if you do open up the comp and it seems a little out of whack, that's probably why. It doesn't look like what's on my screen. That may be why, that you have the options set differently. All right. So this is Skyline's original comp here, or the beginning of his tutorial. And I encourage you to go watch it and see what he does and some of the other stuff he does on his channel. But if we create a render region and our render range here, if you don't know how to do that, you can hold Control, click on the timeline, and then just drag across to where you want. So anywhere you want, you can create a render range, and that will basically play between those two yellow ticks. So let's just go here. I believe that's the correct render range. And you can see, actually it needs to be longer. Let's do that. There we go. You can see how the paint kind of slides in under the mask. So what I believe from his original tutorial, I didn't watch it actually all the way through, but what was going on is the fact that you can kind of see that he has the outline of the paint stroke on there, alpha, and then he has this other one sliding in. So you get kind of this sliding effect coming in. And again, I just thought that it broke the resolution. Some other design things was the line I felt, and this is purely aesthetic, and it's kind of, you know, depending on who you ask, it's different. I kind of wanted to break up this harshness of this line and the text itself. But the main illusion here was broken with this. So we kind of went, or I kind of went about it the same steps that he did, where I was able to get a hold of some brushes. You can see here. Now these are inverted, and this goes back to the brush timeline I showed you at the beginning. So the great thing that happens inside of Fusion is that, say like you want to bring in a ping sequence. So here I have the same brushes, but they are a little bit more. There's about 21 here, and there's about 6 here, I believe, yeah. Now inside Fusion, and it's actually just happened to me right now, sometimes it has a problem reading stuff off disk. Now I know it's not my disk because this is on an M2 drive, but a cool trick that you can do is if you have a bunch of ping files, that's a saver, we don't want a saver. If you hit R on the keyboard, that'll actually bring up a loader, or in this case, it's easy to remember as read. You'll see that I have a ping sequence, and it's not even a sequence, it's just ping files that are named 1 to 21. The great thing is with Fusion, if I select it and hit open, I actually get that it reads it in as a sequence. So we can actually do some cool things with this. There's a little hack that I employ to actually step through the paintbrush ranges to allow me to select different paintbrushes in the comp in case I want to change things up, or even animate the changing brushes without having to reconnect or reduplicate a bunch of different brushes. Now, the problem that exists within Resolve is that it reads ping sequences, or any sequences, I think, different. So if I go to brushes here, let's look for that footage. I might have moved it out. Let's jump over to this tab and let's look for projects. And let's go in there, footage here, see if so I still have the brushes here. So if you look here, you're seeing that it reads it, Resolve itself reads it in these distinct groups. And I don't know if it's because of how the pings were saved, or it could be a number of things of why it reads it this way, but it reads it completely different than Fusion itself. So to get around this problem and still use the same trick I'm gonna show you in a minute, I had to create a second timeline. And if we go back in here, not the Fusion comp, we want the brushes. You can see that this is a compound clip. Let's jump into it. And you can see I just went through and created 1 second clips for each brush. There's only 6 here, only because there was some kind of reading issue with the pings itself. So it could be that the files are corrupted, which I doubt, but it can happen in Resolve. So that's where this timeline comes in. So if we go back to the Fusion comp, and let's jump back in. If we zoom in, you can see that I've brought that into here. So the cool thing we can kind of do with this is if I take this and duplicate it down here, I can add, by the way, I should let everybody know if they haven't noticed, I know a lot of people in tutorials, they take the tool or the node and they throw it into the viewer. I think that's a waste of time. I don't do it. An easy way to get things into the viewer is the 1 and 2 keys. 1, if you have split, you can hit 1, you hit 1 and turn it off. If you have a single view like I do, it's always 2. And if you have a third monitor, it doesn't work on Resolve, but if you're in standalone Fusion, it usually gives you another tick, and you can hit 3 and bring it up on your second monitor in full screen. But we don't have that third one here. But anyway, just so you know, when I'm switching, if you don't see me flicking it, it's because I'm hitting 2 to bring it up into this window. All right, so let's keep going. Some more, I'll probably drop in housekeeping things as we go along, just so you guys know what I'm doing. But, so now we have this, and what we can do is we can add a time stretcher to this. And let's put that up there. So the time stretcher, you wanna go over here and just take off that keyframe. And what we can do, you see that now if I scrub through, it does not change. It's basically holding, the source time is the time on the timeline. So it's holding that time for whatever frame you select. So it's like this is one way you can freeze frame footage that you have, that you've brought into Fusion. So what we're gonna do, we can take advantage of that and say we wanted brush 2. We can go ahead and hit 2, and now you'll see we have brush 2 throughout the whole thing. Or say we wanted brush 3, we get brush 3 throughout that footage. Now, we can take advantage of this with a little simple expression. We'll be able to create custom controls that will change the brush based on what we want. So we'll make it easy to access. The other thing, we want to change the mode into nearest so it doesn't blend together as it's changing. This just works well, and it also counts. If you have multiple frames, say there was 21 and you had it blend, when you change that number, it would try to fade in from one into the other, blend them together as it says. We want it nearest because it'll be a hard step. It'll be like 1, 2, 3. So with that knowledge, what we can do is, usually when I'm building something that's going to be complicated, like the brushes, which you see here, which are essentially carbon copies of each other, I bet these things are like builders. These are very similar to the mindset of pre-comps in After Effects, but this is just a group that I've built out. It has a brush in it, and I've gone through and built up the effect of how I want it to be throughout the entire comp. So if I give this a second to render in, there you go. So this is the whole effect of one brush built up. I keep this around if I need to change or experiment. It's just something I can use or play with or do variations, but I never directly use it in the comp. And I'll show you why and what's a better way. But it's always here just in case I need it, in case I want to try some experiments that I can push back into the other tools. So we'll just leave that here. Now, this is basically this setup here, broken out. So if I go into brushes, our brush here, this is a group, and you can expand. If you do Control G, you'll create a group if you didn't know. But if you need to expand that group, you can double click on it, or you can hit Control E and it will pop it up. So the cool thing here is that I have these brushes. So this here is a wireless node. And if you don't know what a wireless node is, I'll give you a quick. So I have a lot here. You're most likely only gonna have one, which is the wireless link. And what the wireless link does is it allows you to plug in footage and basically duplicate that or instance that across the comp. So if you're not aware, if you bring in a media file, so let's just bring in one of the stock footages I use. So this here, this clip, if I do Control C to copy it and I do Control V to paste it, I'm creating another copy that is separate from each other. But if I wanted to instance it, I would hit Control C and then Shift Control V, and this creates it creates an instance of that. It connected it since I had that selected. And basically what is going on here is that these are bound together. So if I change this size, I guess it'd be better if I showed this in a text tool. So if we got a text 3D, let's just use my moniker by 9. I go ahead and Control V, Shift Control, and I do it. You see that now it says instance text. Now what happens is these are linked. So if I go up here and I change by 9, it will change over here. So you can basically copy these around. You can do instance text or instance footage around the comp without occurring a memory or RAM penalty. The thing is, you can also only have some of the parameters instanced together, and I don't want to get too far into this to make this too long, but if I wanted to say change the style of the, or I'm sorry, not the style. If I didn't want the text to be the same in each one, I can go in here and basically de-instance this. And so now this point is not connected to each other. So this one will be, that's still that by 9, and then this one will be, or that BYN, and then that one will be by 9. But if I change the color, which is still connected, they will both change. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, so if we go back in here, now how does that relate to the wireless? Well, normally, I don't know if this has changed in Fusion because it just let me do it. Let's see again, or in the new Resolve, Fusion inside Resolve. If I copy this, it used to be that you could not instance media, but it looks like they have changed that, which is great. This was a good way to get around using, in older versions, you weren't allowed to instance media. It would basically give you an error. If I jump down here, let's open up Fusion real quick. When plugins are slow to load. So, all right, here we go. So if I brought in a clip here, and we can just bring in brushes. They may have fixed it in this version as well, and I just don't know it yet. But if I tried to instance this, it would give me this error. Do not instance our page. So this might be something they've fixed along the way, but be aware that if that does come up, the wireless node is a way to get around that. So you'll select the wireless node and you'll see that it has this input, but there's no way to select anything. The way this works is that you have to you go ahead and select this, you're gonna click on whatever you want to instance. Like in this case, this footage I want to instance, or I'm sorry, connect to the wireless link, and you'll drag it in here. You will not see any feedback, but once you drop it in there, you'll see that it says, it's basically whatever the node you dropped into it. Now this only works with footage and text and certain elements. It's not gonna work with everything. But now I can basically copy this around or instance around with very little penalty because it's connected back to this media source. And you can even edit that wireless link. You can keyframe it to be different ones. So just a quick way to use the wireless link. So that's what these are here. Inside of these brushes is a wireless link. And what I've done is that as you go down, you see I have the end brushes, which the one we saw, and then I have a brush selection. And inside this brush selection is the time remapper that I showed you before. But you see here I have an expression and it says brush one.brush. And the brush one actually is referring to this group, the group itself. And what I've done, let's close this up, is I've taken, and you can actually add controls on groups. If you know anything about macros or inside Fusion, you can add controls and inputs and outputs. Well, you can do the same thing to groups itself, just on a limited scale. So I can go in here and go edit controls. And what I've done, and you can see it up here, I've added this brush controller, which counts from 1 to 6, which represents our brushes. And it was really easy to go in here. I added it as a slide controller, and I added the range 0 to 6, and then the center is 3. It's very easy. So now I can go in here, let's close this up. And just by selecting that, I can select the different brushes I want to use. We should probably put that in the viewer, there we go. Different brushes I want to use throughout that comp. So I can change them instantly. So you can have 100 brushes. And again, this goes back to me linking that footage, this footage down here where it's all one clip, And I'm basically stepping through the footage with this slider. So we can put that there. And that makes it easy for me to duplicate and change the brush and use them however I want to without having to directly connect 1,000 brushes or bring in 1,000 brushes. After that is just a color corrector. I call it invert. There is an invert node. I'm not using it because I don't know how many people may or may not have Reactor installed. Might have to do a tutorial on Reactor, but this basically, Reactor actually, the invert node uses a channel boolean with a difference selector. I think it's a difference mode if I remember, or negative mode is what it's in. I just went ahead and used a color corrector and pulled the gain out of it just to turn this to this. So that's that. I then plug that into the brush controls. Now the brush controls is the guts of the builder. So if you open that up, in here, our first node, I know it's kind of hard to see, let me pull this out. This right here is a mask paint. And what I have going here, this is what I'm using to kind of sell an effect. Now, it is a standard paint mask. So I have a paintbrush that is being animated across. Let's select it. So I'm animating the right on, right off. But what I'm doing differently to kind of get the ends of that brush, what we want is that to make it look like the brush is being pushed down onto the canvas and pulled across, right? That stroke, which is what we weren't getting here in that original tutorial. So it's kind of sliding in here. So I wanted to create that effect of, you know, the brush going across and actually painting that stroke. Now to get this little frayed mask, inside the brush controls, there's these, if you select image for the brush shape, you can go ahead and get different images, bomb, you can get bubblegum, whatever that is, fish. And all I did was adjusted the parameters. I think this I had was like leaf. And I messed around with some of the parameters, the spacing, the size, the center of it, to kind of get this crazy looking stroke. And what that does is we plug it into another mask. And so as it's painted on, you can see we don't get this straight edge of a mask. We kind of get this, as it reveals the texture underneath, we kind of get this, you know, irregular shape as it goes. Now it's going at speed. Right now it looks weird as it goes slow, still not as realistic, but as it's animated on, you can't tell, like it sells the illusion a little bit better. So that's a mask. And you can see that this is both being plugged into, did I just disconnect that? No, I didn't. In both places, it's this is a great thing about nodes. So it's going into the input and it's going into the foreground and the background here, because we have it plugged into different things. And if you want to see more or pick through this more, you can go through the builder I have here, and it'll kind of, you can step through each node and see the breakdown. So this is just a transform node, just to kind of shrink that down. It was a little bit big. I like to use transform nodes instead of merge nodes because one, it gives me more control, and at the same time I can visually see that I've transformed that particular tool instead of having to, you know, look through a merge comp or a merge tool to figure out if I've transformed it or not. It's not always, it's in certain situations where I decide that I'm going to use a transform tool versus a merge tool, but it does happen. So that's the transform tool. That's the other thing, just a quick note, I can't zoom in anymore. Usually you'll see my comps, and I'll start to release more, but everything is in caps. The reason why is that, so if I have it at a good distance, like this, big comp, I can still kind of read what is going on because it's all in caps. So that's one naming convention I have, and I recommend people come up with naming conventions that work for you. The other thing I do is sometimes in names, you'll see at the beginning of these T, M, and in other places, I might spell it out, but most of the time it's these abbreviations. So I know that that's a transform node, that's a merge node, that's a background node. And it's just helped me, you know, there's colors here that Blackmagic uses, but I like to if I'm searching for something, because you can do a find node, I can use a regular expression, or I can use just that convention to find what I need. Most of my medias I name in for like media in, my footage I should say. So you can see this in brush. So that's just something to be aware. You don't have to adopt my convention, but you should come up with one of your own. All right, so going down, we have another resize. This is a move. It's merged together with a gradient to give it its color. Now I have a color here, and you'll see further down the line, I have a color for the entire comp. But the great thing is that you can jump in here and do individual colors for each brush stroke, or if you don't, you can put a gradient ramp on like I've done, and then use color corrector like I'm doing down here to change the overall color of the comp. And I'll show you that in a minute. So we have an auto domain. The auto domain, if you don't know what the domain is basically, we have all of these pixels here. We don't want Fusion to calculate this. We just don't want that to happen. So we basically put on an auto domain so it only calculates the part of the image that's actually there. And then we just have a final merge. So I encourage you to kind of jump through here. I know I didn't show all of the controls. You can go through, it's pretty standard of me transforming, layering everything on top of each other, color, things like that, and then finally outputting in that to this brush control. So this brush control is another transform node. And I use this as, if you've done any 3D work, it's a control node. So basically I can take this and move everything I've done in there just around. I like to use these. It's a personal preference, it's not necessary, but it allows me to control each element individually with one single control and animate off of that as well. So this gives me the ability, like if I want to size, you know, the brushstroke individually, it's not working. If I want to change where it's located at, higher or lower based on the text, and you might have to do that, then it's very easy to do, to just go to this node on the outside. This is a standard merge. And again, these are exactly the same, except for up here, I have a different number for a different brush. So if I go in to add that in, that brush is not animated on, I don't believe. So there we go. You'll see that's a different brush. And if I decide, hey, I don't want that brush, maybe I want 3, you see it instantly updates. And it's just an easy way to do that. So I'll go back to 2. Same thing here, same setup. I believe that's not animated on, so let's jump further down the timeline. All right, so there we go, different brush. Again, jump up here, we'll see that's number 0. I've used the underlay, that's what this is called. Highly recommend using them to separate your comps so you can just know where everything is. It also makes it great for when you have to move a lot of related parts. So this is where I connect. This is the bracket setup. So if we go in here, this is a mask, so you don't see anything. But as we go down, you'll see I have the paint bracket, which is the square in the middle, or it is a square, it's not a rectangle. And as we keep going down, these are, now there's, I should talk about this as far as that, as I go further down. So let's jump over here, and we see we have our full paint strokes. This is all 3 together. And again, this is another transfer node. So before, where I had the transform nodes, I can move each individual stroke any way I want. You can see there. Now I have a transfer node at the end of this, so I can move the entire, you know, paint strokes, all 3 of them, anywhere I want. And again, that's just a personal preference. You can do it inside the merge. I just prefer not to do it. So when we get up here, and kind of jump down, I have this right here is actually a bitmap mask. And it's taking, from this control, it's taking and creating an alpha channel for me based on the strokes. It's just a lot easier to plug in a bitmap mask and then output that to use everywhere. There are, in some instances I've run into, where I'm not able to take the transform control and plug it directly into a mask, which is why this is here. It doesn't happen often. Some nodes allow it and some don't. So you can see I'm taking this bitmap mask and I'm plugging it directly into the paint brackets in that mask. And what this does is it blocks out certain parts from the texture. So it's taking that texture and blocking out certain parts of or masking out certain parts of the bracket itself. And what I've done also, because I didn't want, if we look at the original again, it's very clean looking. I wanted to kind of break that up with texture as well. And you can create any texture you want, whether it be noise, clouds, something like that. I wanted to just go ahead and use the original paint mask texture that I was already using, the brushes, this itself. So what I've done is I went ahead and I've selected a frame by using a time remapper, just like I did before. So I've taken that final alpha, which is here, which is all 3 strokes, and I've selected a frame from that, which is this here. So now I have a new mask that looks like this. And then I've scaled that up through a transform node and plug that back into the paint bracket. So this is what you're seeing here. That's what's breaking out that bracket. And again, it's something you can change. You can put any kind of mask, but I wanted to give some kind of texture. These brush strokes are not the best for this breakup. But again, you can add different ones, or you can change the brush strokes, or you can change this node. But I just wanted to break that up so it gave a little more balance to the whole design. So as we go down, you can see now we got the bracket, the breakage, the paint strokes all in there. And then as we move down, we kind of wanted this overlap. It's kind of subtle. And this is what Skyline Motion did in his original one. All it is I'm taking the original paint bracket, adding a second transform node. Actually, this is a merge, and basically masking out the part that I want. So there's a mask here, you can see. There's another way to do this, but this was the fastest, and it's something that Skyline Motion does in his original tutorial, and it just brings this edge back. And there is a way to get around not using this setup, but it was the fastest way to do that. This is just a shadow on all of this. So that shadow comp, and then we have our text. So in this case, it's just start. We can have it as 3 lines, but by having the text separate like this, again, it gives us control. We could rotate it as you see here. I can size it up. I can do whatever I want outside of the bracket and the brushes, even though it's going to be interacting with that later. Once we go down here, you'll see that instead of, again, let's go back to our referral, Skyline or Sky Motion. Is it Skyline or Sky Motion? I have to look that up. If I'm saying it wrong, please somebody correct me. But he has it on top of the comp here, or on top of the brushes. Again, I wanted to integrate that more into design. This is purely my aesthetic choices. You know, some might like it, some might like his better. But it's more, I wanted to integrate that more into the comp itself or the paint brushes. Now, it's a little sharp. We could do more. We can add texture to the edges here, but it would make it harder to read, so I kept it just straight. And we can see it just cuts into nicely into that paintbrush. And it doesn't matter which one you use, what texture you use, it'll cut into all of this here. And that's all happening within the merge node here. And you can go ahead and see the setup. I have an operator of ATOP, the alpha gains and the burn-ins down and the blends up. So you can study how I made this transparent and cut in. It's all in the node, not doing anything crazy like. I believe though I did have, and not crazy like, but if you don't know the difference between multiply by mask and apply by mask, is something that's better explained in the manual, but this is how I'm getting this effect. Now you see when I turned off multiply by mask, it disappeared. I definitely want that in. And you see if I haven't inverted that mask, it kind of cuts it inverts the mask. There's no other way to explain that. So those are definitely checked inside that merge node. After that, we have a color shift. And again, this is me color the entire comp, and I can go through and adjust the color to anything I want. Let's say I didn't want all of this to be red. Say I wanted to kind of, have a gradient from here to here, very similar to how he has it here. You can do that by going to the color shift, all you have to do is go ahead and put that in the middle, so it's the grayscale, and then you can go into each control. So here we have the brush control. Let's just put it on screen for a minute and drop that down. And I can change this, so I can do a red, I can do a black, and then if I jump back over here, you'll see that that stroke is what we colored it. So we can individually color that if we want to, or even layer this on top. It probably wouldn't be good, but we can do that. So let's just undo that. There we go. And we can also play around with the tint nodes, or modes, I should say. I had that in fast, which is why when I had that red there, it turned blue, but you get the idea. Or if you don't know this, you can bypass the connected node completely. If you hit Control P, you can see I can basically turn that off and it wouldn't affect anything. So I can go back here again to that color and change it up, say red, and say that black. And now it doesn't affect it at all, but we won't do that. Let's not do it again. There's just definitely options in the setup. I like to build my node trees and structures so that I do have options. And that kind of gives me that option to do whatever I want. All right, so let's turn that back on and give it some kind of color, a little bit of red, it's a little bit of orange. All right, and that's pretty much it. There's a final node here, merge node, and I have a background. Usually I test with the background here. All I'm doing is I got a overlay on top of that. Mess with the color to desaturate the image, and then I combined it together. I've actually turned this down, the blend down, so if I turn it back up, that's how it would look. And then I have that final on top. Now I'm using this as, I was using it as a test once in the comp itself, and so you can plug in your own backgrounds in here, or you can do what I did before, is go into that merge node, turn the blend completely down, and then now you get a nice alpha channel. You get a transparency in the back. So now you can output this and put it on top of any footage you want inside Fusion, not Fusion, Resolve, which is what I did before. The other thing that's nice here too is this down here is a saver node, and you can bring that up by hitting W. That will allow you to save out EXR files that you can render out and then drop back in to Resolve into the timeline. So that's exactly what I did here. So if we go back to the presentation, you see how that updated, which is nice. But all of these here, like this one, is actually a rendered out EXR. So we can see that, not in stock, I rendered it in finals. Now you see it here as one file, but it's actually a lot of files. So if we go here and then post projects, finals. So I have colors, that's what I call them, but that cake, you see it renders 99 files here. That was the timeline. So it rendered almost 100 files. So this is very similar to raw DNG or any other files you bring in. You can't bring them in through Control I here. You have to go to the panel here inside the media panel and bring it in this way, because it'll see it as one file. So projects, paintbrush, actually I want finals and colors. So if I jump in here, you'll see it sees it as one file, and that's what we want. It's a lot easier to bring it in this way. Be aware that these files can get heavy. They have a lot of information in them. I just like the control I get here by not having to wait for a cache setup. Imagine if I had each of these were Fusion comps, it would take forever to render this. There might be errors. I would run out of memory pretty fast. So having one comp and a separate timeline where I can change everything up, let it render once, render it out, and then go back into, that is the cut page, go back into another timeline and just drop it in is nice. And that way I can do retimings. This one you can see here, what I've done is I have the original flow, I have a hold, and then I reverse it. Here, I don't do anything special. Same thing here. The original, I have a hold, and then there's a reverse. So that pretty much is it for this comp. It's not too advanced as far as like there's no expressions or things like that. And it's not a dig against Skyline Motion. Again, I'm gonna have to go back and find out. It's more of a different way to do things, a different way to see things. Again, I wanted to achieve a certain effect. I wanted the brush strokes to look like they were painted on. And even then I could take it a little bit further, tweak it a little bit more to dial it right in to really make it look like the timing is painted on with keyframes and things like that. So I'm gonna wrap it up here. I think I've been talking for about 40 minutes and I hope to put out some more helpful tutorials. Hopefully this helps you guys. It's a free comp, take it, use it as you want. Please don't redistribute it, but stay tuned to my channel. I will be putting up more content and hopefully getting better at this tutorial thing. Not the greatest yet, and I'm still setting up. I'm at this time building multiple computers. I've only finished one, the one you see me working on, but I'm in the process of building 2 more Threadripper computers with RTX cards, RTX 2080 Ti's to kind of beef up, everything I'm doing with Fusion, motion graphics, and film. So just keep it here, stay locked. Again, I will do my best to get better, stop rambling, have scripts, but any comments, feedback, suggestions, let me know. And before I go, there is one last thing. If you do have slowness in your comp, it seems in the new Fusion and also in the new Resolve 16, the release candidate, that the mass paint has serious performance issues. It wasn't like this when I was building the comp, but if you go in, the mass paint is actually not in here, sorry. It's in the brush control. It's this first one, MP. This, if you want to replace this with a regular mask, it might help on performance. You have to do it in all 3. But this seems to be a bottleneck inside the comp in the latest Resolve 16 from what I've been testing. Just the paint node seems to be extremely slow. If you have any problems, that's where you probably want to replace the node or the tool to kind of help. I'll be placing this online with a link. Go ahead and download it for free, and please tell me what you think. Appreciate it. All right, thanks, bye.